Hello and welcome to the Duquesne Sports pregame show here on DSTV. Today we'll be previewing Duquesne football going up against Boston College at Alumni Stadium in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm Jack Morgan, alongside me, Dylan Pfister. And this will be an interesting one for Duquesne. Duquesne is going to come into this one with an 0-1 record. They had played Toledo in the last week, and they're playing a really good Boston College team, Dylan, that is coming off a huge win against FSU.
Yep, coming off a big win against FSU, and like you said, the Dukes, are coming off of that loss to Toledo. Now, of course, we've seen the Dukes in this position early on in the season many times. Go down, play a big school, maybe in the ACC, and kind of get it handed to the Dukes, but for now, it's good to see them put that effort in, and it was good to see that effort against Toledo, especially early on. They didn't let them run away with it too easily. I believe it was 14-7 to start the game. But like you said, a very good Boston College team. Not much in the hope category in terms of wins for Duquesne fans here, but hopefully cover the spread and have a good outing for the Dukes.
As of recording, the spread is not up, and trust me, if it was, we would bring it to you. But we'll throw in a graphic at some point. On the screen we will have the spread. But as of right now, if you need a little more context to that, ESPN, their analytics say that Boston College is favored to win by a whopping 99%. So it's not as much for Duquesne. Maybe not as much about winning, though. You obviously go up. You play to win every game, but there might be some other victories you're looking to take from this game. So for Duquesne, they head into this one after losing to Toledo, and it's a tough start to the year. It's not going to get easier. They have Youngstown State coming up next week. They got to focus 1 week at a time. And what were some, in that Toledo game, was there anything you saw, and there were positives, but were a couple positives that you saw in that Toledo game?
There are definitely a couple positives, more than a couple. And like I said, these teams, we're gonna look for stuff other than wins and losses. We're gonna look at individual performances and the team coming together to finish games out, finish quarters out, finish halves out. But right now, I want to talk about some individual performances that we saw. Taj Butts, we all know the name, obviously going to be a huge factor for the Dukes this year. 8th in the NEC in rushing yards last season. He had 3 touchdowns. With a bigger workload this season coming up, hopefully those numbers will increase for him. He averaged almost 8 yards a carry off of 5 touches against Toledo. Pretty good average on only a few touches, but against a strong defense like that, definitely a strong performance from Butts.
And Jerry Schmidt actually, post-game of that Toledo loss, actually talked about those, not just Taj Butts, but also Jamario Clements, saying that he thinks he's got 2 of the best running backs in the NEC. And he might not be wrong.
I definitely would agree with him on that. Now we see both guys returning from last year, and we saw Edward Robinson leave the team. Obviously, he led in touches, yards, touchdowns. He was that powerhouse back last season. But these are 2 quality backs the Dukes have in Taj Butts and Jamario Clements. It'd be really exciting to see them get more touches this season.
And back to that Toledo game, they were in that for the first half, and I feel like the second half things started to slip away. Schmidt actually touched on that, saying that they're trying to take advantage of some of the things they did well in the first half, as any wise team would. He just said they did not execute them as well. Heading into this one, are you going to try and do some more of the same things if you're Jerry Schmidt? And how are you going to be able to execute better in the second half? Because that was a big problem in the loss to Toledo.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good aim to have for the Dukes in these types of matchups, is to just work on the execution, work on putting that plan out on the field, and just letting your players do what they do best. Because I think often in these games, coaches, teams find themselves in a position where they feel the need to get everybody out there and get certain chemistries moving, where I don't necessarily think that needs to be the case for this Duquesne team. I think that they would have found a little bit more success in that game if they had just stuck to the the basic, I could say, starting 3 or 4 receivers, but somebody that I definitely liked Parentes going to a lot in that game was John Irby, and I'd like to see a little bit more of him against Toledo, especially down the stretch.
Absolutely, and John Irby, he was actually a teammate of Darius for a couple of years, actually, at Rhode Island, and you'd have to imagine that connection. It's got to be fun to play with one of your old quarterbacks, and at a better school, I'd say, in Duquesne, in a conference where Duquesne kind of runs the table here. They're picked to win it again this year, the NEC. And games like this, they probably do a lot to not just build confidence again in the sense of doing this stuff against a much better team than you, and a team that you're not going to have to face in terms of the skill level in the future. So for Duquesne, how would you like to see them execute against Boston College? And are you going to try and do anything different, like play-wise? You're going to, because I think that's the other part. Going to try and get backups in there. And we saw this. Darius was out of the game by the end of the third quarter, and the backups weren't doing too much. But like you said, is it about just taking the positives and just executing?
Yeah, when you ask that question, Jack, it makes me think back to the West Virginia game that we actually attended last season, where we saw honestly, in games like this, anybody can go off, but we saw the best players for Duquesne having the best games. We saw DJ Powell having a touchdown on, I believe it was the first or second offensive drive for the Dukes. Keyshawn Johnson had a fantastic game, and I think that something like that coming around the second time would be successful for the Dukes as well. So I think in this Boston College game, which is what they really didn't do in Toledo as much, is just really target those starting receivers and get that chemistry flowing early. If that's not what these games are for, then I don't know what it is. Obviously, raising money for the school and such, but we're here to get that chemistry flowing. So I think back to West Virginia, and I think about those guys that aren't here anymore. So now it's time for guys like John Irby to step up in those moments against the best of the best in college football and show this team, this school, and everybody in the sport that the Dukes are here to play.
Absolutely, and I'm going to focus on a guy for Boston College, their quarterback, Tom Castellanos. Now, passing-wise, he didn't do as much as, you would think, and he only threw 16 times in the game against FSU, but he completed 10 of those 16 for 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, but the big part was his threat on the ground. 14 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. So that does pose a problem for Duquesne. Now, obviously, when you're in practice, you're going against a rushing threat quarterback in Darius Parentes. But this is a guy that has shown that he can do it against, who was the number 10 team in the country, whether you think that or not. Very good team in Florida State. So when you look at Castellanos, what jumps out to you most? Is it his rushing or is it his passing? Because I think he's really good in both areas, and he was really accurate in the game against FSU.
Yeah, he's definitely great in both areas, and you could easily say that, it's the running. He only had 106 yards passing, but he also only had 10 completions off 16 attempts, and that's just because that offense is so rush dominant. They had 52 rushing attempts split between the team, and I think that's just really goes to show that he doesn't have quite the opportunity to show off that arm to the extent that he could. But I think he's as much of a dual threat as Darius is in that regard, obviously better, but they both definitely have a similar skill set that the Duke's defense is able to practice against coming up for this game. Unfortunately for them, however, the Dukes ranked 7th in total defense in the NEC last season, and we're talking Boston College. So obviously, we all can agree that matchup isn't going to go their favor, but I think it is only going to open up more lanes for Castellanos and allow him to have a really big day with numbers.
Another guy to bring up, Kai Robichaux. He was a dog in a game against Florida State. Obviously, you're going to have to think that he's going to do a little more of the same. And when you have not just Robichaux, but a couple of other guys that can really run the ball, how much does that open up the playbook?
Oh, big time. And yeah, like you said, there's Kyle Robichaux, and then as well, Trayshawn Ward had 12 carries, but 19 for Robichaux. They combined for over, I believe, 160 yards, a touchdown split between the two of them. Obviously, that's going to open up lanes for Castellanos to rip the ball around. And like I said, the Duquesne defense struggled last year. The times when they did succeed were those splash plays, but run defense, they were ranked 6th. So I think Boston College is just going to run all over them and open up those passing lanes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get into some picks here. And for Duquesne, it might not be a game that they can win, so maybe we should look at it from a sense of, will they cover? We don't know the spread right now, but I think we have a good idea of where it will be. We'll give a final score update, but also, will they cover?
I'm going to go ahead and say the Dukes will not cover in this game, and that is simply for the fact that we've talked about the domination of the Boston College offense so far, but I want to talk about the defense real quick. This is a team that struggled majorly last season when it came to the pass rush, and that would almost be an area where the Dukes could maybe take advantage of in this game, and they could maybe cover that spread. But unfortunately for the Dukes, unfortunately for Boston College, they greatly improved that defensive line play over this offseason, and now you have a guy like Donovan Ezeraku, who had 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss last week. And this is a team who averaged 1 sack a game last season. That's with a 6-sack performance in one of their games against Virginia. This was a bad D-line. So a high-flying offense like Duquesne, that's a good matchup for them, but not after what we've seen so far. Not after what I saw against FSU. I think that Boston College is going to dominate offensively, defensively, and the Dukes will fail to cover the spread.
I think it's going to be a fun experience regardless. I mean, me and you will be there in Boston College, and also make sure to look out for that type of content on Duquesne TV on Instagram and Duquesne Student on Twitter. And as for the game and the predictions, I'm not sure if I see a universe where Duquesne pulls it out. At the same time, not expected to do so, but I think there's a lot of positives that can be taken from this game. I think that we will see Duquesne. I think they will cover. The last time Duquesne played an ACC opponent, it was Florida State. They actually covered in that game. Not by a lot, but they did cover, and I think that is something that a betting man who's probably there will be people betting on this game. There's a lot of people that bet on games like this because the spreads are that's almost the main part of the game for a fan. But as you look at it from the team, Duquesne's going to come out and they're going to play hard. And you got to remember against Toledo, they did keep up with them for a good solid half of football. They had a chance to make it 21-17 if not for that Darius Parentes pick in the red zone with about 10 seconds left to go in that half. So really Duquesne has a chance to keep up. I think they will for about a quarter, but I think that's all they have in them, and it's really not their fault. It's just Boston College is too good. I have Boston College winning this one. I have them winning by a total of 49-7. I think Duquesne will keep it close in that first quarter, but I think Boston College will prove to be too big, too strong, and just too good. Anyways, that will do it for the pregame show. We appreciate you tuning in. For Dylan Fisser, I'm Jack Morgan saying so long and enjoy the game, everyone.